Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. We'll give it another 30 seconds or so. As we've just hit the mark for people to join, and we'll get going as we normally do. And really look forward to taking you through our third of 4 trends, but actually it's our fourth in our series on valorizing the unusable. So we give it another 30 seconds. Hopefully, people will join and we can get going. While we do that, I am going to share my screen so you can all see it. Fab. Okie dokie. Fab. Looks like everything's working perfectly. We'll give it another 10, 15 seconds. Hello, everyone. Those that are joining now, we're just going to get started in a moment. And I'm really excited to take you through our next trend. Okay. I think that's perfect. We'll wait a minute. We'll get going. Hello all. For those who don't know me, but many of you probably do by now after week by week sessions that we've been running, I'm Edward Bergen. I'm a principal analyst at FutureBridge, looking at the food and nutrition and the chemicals, materials, natural resources industries, looking at what the future may hold and creating hopefully fabulous, insightful, brilliant programs like this one to talk you through what's next in our industry and trying to marry up what consumers say they want and what the industry is capable of creating. And this is our third trend of 4 food tech trends that we've created. It's our 4th event because we did one on macro trends right at the beginning. So this is valorizing the unusable. We're going to be looking at what's the next step in waste valorization. How do we make products out of stuff that would have been thrown away, and ideally make food products, stuff that we can eat. But first, if you don't know FutureBridge, this is who we are. We're a techno-commercial consulting advisory firm. We work globally. We work across Fortune 500 companies and many other, and we focus on helping companies to understand how they can innovate from from a 1 to 25 year perspective, and identify and then shortlist and then figure out how they can implement those technologies into their infrastructures. Gives you a bit of an introduction. Now, what is this one all about? And as you may have found out, I have a couple of little kiddos at home. Quite love a bit of Dr. Seuss. Perfect thing to read, very tongue twisty. My 6-year-old generally goes, "What was that all about?" But Dr. Seuss is full of amazing insights. And from the Lorax, for those that have maybe seen the movie or read the book, it is not about what it is, it's about what it can become, which I think summarizes this entire thing perfectly. We may have had one idea of what something could have been or has been, but actually, there's so many more options available. So that's Dr. Seuss. We could actually stop there and you could take your wisdom, but I want to share with you about valorizing the unusable. This is a super interesting stat. It's got this one from the WHO, and they were talking about waste valorization, where the industry is today, and we've been talking about this trend for a long time. You know, a good few years about how we reuse waste or recycle better. Most of the stuff that we actually reuse, though, is being put into other industries. I might talk about a couple of those other industries today, but only 1% is actually reused for humans to eat. So there's clearly an opportunity to tell amazing stories about waste foods, and actually maybe create new foods for us to enjoy and eat, and explore as well. So we will look at a load of innovations today focused on that too. Um, Now, when we look at where this market is going, this is just the upcycled food market, and looking at a 10-year sort of perspective, it's going to tick along and grow over 10 years. There's a lot of stringencies to jump through, which I will cover, but the CAGR is looking good and expected to be nearly 100 billion by the turn of the next decade. So it's really exciting, and you'll find out why, because a lot of this industry is still in that research phase where we expect lots of innovation to come and lots of really cool stories to tell consumers about how the products were made. But what's the drivers? Like, what's going on with this space? And there is a stringent regulatory landscape. I'm going to hold you there because I'm going to take you through that a little bit in the next slide. But there's a lot of legislation surrounding this particular industry. We're going to park it for a second. What also is going on? There is work being done around waste upcycling and how we can build better infrastructure in using it. In my local area, I live in northwest London area in the UK, for those that are joining from abroad, and we've just got our food bin for the first time ever. We have a food bin at home. But what we are starting to see is better local infrastructure, giving us more ways to recycle, making it easier for local management services around waste to actually sort and collect and the foods that we throw away and the packaging that we throw away and so on. That is getting better. What else is happening? We're getting a lot more investment. We're getting from private and public. There's a lot of opportunity for investment. And finally, we are seeing labels. In the States, we have this upcycle certification. Not seeing it in Europe yet. It's a big area that the industry is looking at. I went to an event last November in Food Ingredients Europe where we were talking to some upcycle companies creating some very cool stuff. And they really want to see this certification. So watch this space. We will see it. When we look at those regs, though, generally the story is actually really positive. It might look like in some countries they're putting some real challenges on brands that they've got to build better infrastructure faster, but generally with legislation you don't see a picture across the whole world across the same issue. You know, one continent or country decides to do something, the other doesn't care. In this space, though, we're seeing a lot of work happening across all 5 continents around um, upcycling or recycling better. We're seeing incentivification rather than just fining companies for not being on board. We're seeing lots of really clear targeting in quite a short time period. So whether we get there, that remains to be seen, but actually we're seeing lots of countries really working on this, which helps when you're building supply chains and finding ways to upcycle waste better. So the story is looking good. what we found really interesting, so if you've been to any of our other events before, what we saw from this particular trend is there was quite a lot of skin in the game. So we saw a lot of ingredients companies, of course, they're figuring out ways to, they've got a core ingredient, but then it has a shell or a stalk or a leaf that they don't use, and they're figuring out ways to use it in functional foods or sell it on to another company that might use it. Of course, the manufacturers are telling great stories and finding ways to reuse their food that would have gone to waste that's part of their supply chains. But then also, there are tech companies involved heavily in this, making really exciting stories and around helping companies with being more transparent across their value chain, finding the waste in their value chain, tracking that waste in their value chain so that they can upcycle. There are policymakers, there are investment agencies and financial institutions, a lot of work going on in academia, and even advocacy groups as well. Just looking at this page, and I might talk about some of these innovations, as we go through this one. You've got companies like OFI, they've got an upcycle certification, like I showed you in the previous slide, where they're upcycling chili pulp, and not just the seeds, to create things like hot sauces. We've got companies like Renewal Mill. That are converting byproducts of ingredients like okra into other superfood ingredients, and putting into baking mixes. We've got technology partners like Netzro helping organizations to figure out how they can track the waste that's part of their supply chain, especially in the brewing industry, that then can be upcycled to other industries, into food and pet food, and even cosmetics. So you've got different players playing around, and I'm going to take you through some, but the list goes on. This is a tiny snapshot of the exploration that's happening right now in this space. Um, just to give you a picture, and I am not the scientist, I'll do my best. If you want to ask a question, we've got one of our fabulous scientists in our chat. He's called Kaushal. Please write in messages if you would like any questions about anything you're seeing that gets super technical. I'll always do my best, but he's there as well. Now, what this shows you is just how wide this trend is across the value chain, and we're seeing technologies and innovations appearing that can create, and they're helping brands to create amazing new things. So everywhere from composting biochar to improve fertility in soil, through to using extrusion to take starchy byproducts to create new snacks, using AI to help categorize and sort waste better and help create really clever, smart supply chain management systems, and the list goes on. So we're seeing so many innovations across the value chain, and when we work with customers of ours, they're talking to us about different areas of the value chain and what they can do, how they can maybe sell off their waste, or how can they maybe create something new from somebody else's waistline. This is a continuous request in us helping organizations to explore this entire space. Really interesting. So we're going to look at a few of those technologies, and then we're going to look at some of the really core examples. So what are we seeing on screen? If you've been to our piece before, we have something called the FutureBridge Early Science Composite Index. We take a core year. At the moment, we're working on 2020. That's probably going to change as years go on, but 2020 feels like a really strong, baseline for just to see how some of the newer technologies are growing. And then what we do is we understand what the scientists are doing, what the researchers are doing as one element. So what patents are being filed, what new literature in science is being written about, what sort of investments are we seeing from startups and new startups appearing in the space, what general industry stories are coming out around particular technologies, and how hot are those stories. So we have a whole method of tracking early innovation to maybe predict, well, if it's growing in the early stages now, what might it look like in end product innovation in the future? So you take examples like encapsulation that we may have saw on the previous slide. You take examples of digital traceability systems or smart supply chain management systems, nutrient recovery systems. All of these are exploding in growth, especially in the last 2 years, in terms of new ways to use them. It's a really exciting space. So I'm going to take you through some of the key examples. If you have more questions about any of these, just throw them. We'll come back to you. We'll tell you about, there's a big, deeper report behind this presentation, and we can give you some information about that as well. Okay, So let's look across different industries. I'm going to cover different applications, different examples, from across the value chain. So hopefully you will get a bit of a story today. So first one, we're going to start with alcohol. Or low alcohol. So this is a low alcoholic beer, where this organisation, the University of Lisboa, have been researching. This is a sort of an early TRL level. They've been researching how to create new low alcoholic beer from waste. So they're using, malt waste. They're using waste from stale bread to create a low alcoholic beer, but they also are looking at how the different ingredients that they're seeing in the waste can combine together to create amazing taste as well. But they've actually replaced 50% of the malt with stale bread as a solution in this method. So really interesting one that we might see that might be the future of sort of the alcohol industry or the low alcohol industry, make it much more sustainable. So there's another one. This is an example from a company called Find, and they are using biomass fermentation, and using sort of waste products to create new alternative proteins, as an example. They're also using it to create umami flavors to enhance the flavors of meat analogs as well. So you'll be able to get better alternative proteins in the future that taste more like the real thing. So again, using different methods to create something new. Again, using things like brewers' spent grain and waste corn to create Dozilla dry bread to create these alternative protein flavor enhancers and mushrooms. We've got examples of fertilizer in early TRLs. This is TRL level 6. And this is actually really interesting because it's creating a recovery system. So they're figuring out ways to keep the nutrients from essentially poo, waste from the cattle industry, and figure out ways to make sure that nutrient is preserved, that then it can be reused to either as fertilizer, and again back into the industry. Really, it might seem a bit of an icky one, but actually a fascinating bit of research that we're seeing. Again, fueling new growth and agriculture, renewable agriculture. We've got this one from a company called Bisviridi, a UK-based company. They're a late TRL stage at TRL level 7. So they're at that sort of prototype stage, and they've figured out ways to look at waste and reuse it to create biogas and oils, again, to fuel that straight back into their systems and infrastructure as well. So again, reusing to fuel their own manufacturing. Now, we then get into some of these really clever food products. So this is an example called Supplant, and this is at a really late stage. So they're using stalks from grains and from wheat, using the stalks to create a pasta. And again, really high fiber, and they've talked about fewer calories and so on. But another fascinating, from the wheat stalks rather than just the ends. Really great bit of innovation, and we're seeing lots of this type of innovation when we're getting sort of waste pasta being produced. And the bakery and pasta industry seem to be a little bit more mature than maybe some of the other areas. This one was on my massive player ecosystem. So this is a brand called Blue Stripes. They've been focused on how can we use the entire cacao fruit? How can we use all of the cocoa fruit better? And they look at using it for the pods, the husks, pulps to create something new. So they've actually got all sorts of innovations from across snacks and breakfast cereals. But this one that you can see on the screen, they've got a cacao water, basically a functional water. They've talked about hydration, electrolytes, and functionality in a healthy drink. But again, using the entire cacao fruit to do it. So that's one from the USA, and that's commercialized. We got this one from a brand called Matriarch. They've looked at fresh vegetables in their supply chain, and generally the focus is just about reducing emissions. And before vegetables go to waste, especially tomatoes go to waste, about re-upcycling them to create things like sauces that they then go and sell into the industry. So they've also focused on packaging as well, moved everything into carton packaging, but really focused on that carbon story that this can produce. So this is more for me storytelling and what you can say about your waste upcycling. And another Another lovely story is this one. So this is using cascara. So for those, I'm a big coffee fan. This is an example of that, using the skins of coffee cherries as a superfruit. So this is a great example where they've launched all sorts of different flavors, but they really focused on that, the functionality of these ingredients, and using that cascara and telling stories about it, but then adding that functional storytelling to it. So this is a brand that was launched, I think, March 2024. And they've also, and they launched, I think they launched in Minnesota in the States, and now have expanded that across 10 different states in the as well. So they're really focused on scaling up at the moment, and again telling that story about cascara. And then I didn't really want to leave this one out. This brand's been around for a little while, so they've been around. They were sort of expanding their ranges back in 2023, if not before, and they keep adding new products into their range. And they're focused in that supplement functional space with many of these ranges. You can see there's everywhere from protein bars to protein shakes to daily little supplements that people can take. But they're really focused on upcycling barley protein as a key ingredient in a lot of these. So grains and barley as well. So it's another really lovely example. They're looking at the waste in the beer industry, which is a common story that we see, and then creating all sorts of different things in their sort of functional ranges. Really exciting, and lots to look at. So check them out, because they're a cool one to really get an understanding of what you can do across ranges. Just to bring it all together, and I'm not going to talk you through every single one. We've given you a bit of a picture already, but for those that like taking pictures of slides, this is definitely the one to sort of take. We tried to build a bit of a radar of where these technologies are in a act, prepare, and watch. So I 1 year, 5 years, 10 years kind of idea, and where we see these innovations going. So we've mentioned on today a lot of different technologies, but we'll try to just break them down by the different value chain areas: ags, food processing, packaging, and retail and food service, and just the different technologies that we are seeing that are helping companies to upcycle their waste better. So anywhere from the packaging telling the organization when something's going to go to waste, through using digital traceability techniques, as an example, and beyond and beyond. I'm worried about time, so you're welcome to ask any questions about these, and we've covered a load of them. One thing that we've been doing, though, in this presentation each week is to talk about, well, what might be the future of these different trends. And we've created some sort of product concepts, product examples as a result. Now, we created an example here. You saw the example from the cacao water earlier. When will we start to see chocolate bars packed in themselves? So using we've seen early stage research, which is using the cacao pod to actually create packaging, create a form of sort of paper-based packaging. So again, could we see chocolate in the future which is packed in itself? So here's the brand back in the pod that we created, and I hope the chocolate tastes really lovely. But also outside of new products, and there's so many new products and stories that we can tell, we've seen a lot of things happening in kind of how consumers and brands sort of engaging in digital infrastructure too. So actually where upcycling and buying waste valorized products, you can start to see maybe benefits as a consumer. There are apps out there already like Too Good To Go, where you can buy waste food cheap, but also can we start to give rewards, incentives to consumers or even to brands for having waste upcycling in as part of their infrastructure. So even to brands where maybe it's going to be governments that get involved in rewarding brands the more they upcycle their waste. Now the final one is seeing more and more local infrastructure in handling waste products, and how they can be again reutilized, sent out to where they can be recreated into something else. So some examples of what might the future hold, I think probably in the shorter term, but please do ask any more questions. That's it for Valorizing the Unusable. We have a larger report on this, so if you would like access to that, just write in the chat or send me a private message and I will get that out to you. We can always have a chat about it as well. But for those that want to come to our final food tech trend, which is going to be next week on the 22nd of April, we're going to be doing a focus on how artificial intelligence is going to change the game in food and nutrition innovation. So scan the QR code. I think Kaushal also popping the link into the chat. Definitely still register, even if you can't make the time slot. The great thing about this platform is that you'll still get the video on demand straight after it's finished. So please do that, and really looking to see you there really soon. So thank you so much for listening, and have a fabulous day. All right then, thanks. Bye.